Welcome into this Friday edition of Palmetto Sports Daily. Carmine, it is finally the day we get to see if the Gamecocks will advance to the national championship. But before they can do that, they have to beat the team that took them down in the Natty last year. South Carolina facing off against UConn, and some of our team members are out there in Phoenix with the story.
Greetings from Arizona, and what a beautiful game day here in Phoenix. Rick, along with Julia and Caroline, and tonight, 7 p.m., the Gamecocks against UConn, a rematch from last year's title game won by UConn. But ladies, what do you think we're going to see tonight?
Well, I think we've spent so much time on the fact that it's a rematch of last year's game, but these teams are so different. Yes, there are some players that carried over from those rosters, but I think it's going to be a very, very different game this time around, especially since South Carolina has a lot more length than they did before, and Medina Okot and the other forwards on the team. And, you know, talking about who UConn still has, they still have two very strong players.
Yeah, they do. They still have AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong, who both made a big-time impact in that national championship game this time last season, the last time that these two teams met. So kind of focusing on those players is going to be a big deal. But to your point, Julia, these players from both teams said in the locker room when we spoke with them yesterday, the biggest takeaway was that these are different teams, this is a different season, and this is a different tournament. So these teams aren't thinking at all about what happened last year, because that doesn't matter anymore. What matters, Rick, is what happens tonight.
And you got to look at the people on USC's roster that they have this tournament experience, like your Raven Johnson. Hardly anyone in college basketball has the experience she has. This is her 5th consecutive trip to the Final Four. She's got 2 championship rings, and without a doubt, she's one of the best floor generals in the game. She can do it all. She can score if she needs to, but her primary focus is just running the offense, getting it to her open teammates. And one thing I really love about Raven, little point guard who can rebound. She has no fear. Joyce Edwards, she needs to be on point, an all-SEC and all-American forward. And then you have Tessa Johnson. Her three-point shooting can really make a difference and free up the inside for Carolina's big. So I think it's going to be a really tightly contested game, a physical contest, the game we expect this time of year.
Well, the thing is you talk about all the people who have tournament experience, but there's a lot of new faces on South Carolina's team who have not been here before, but are acting like they have. Talk about Agat Makir and the tournament that she's had. She had 3 double-digit games before the tournament. She has now had a double-digit game in every game of the tournament. So her having a big day will play a big impact in this game. And then Tanaya Latson, of course, she comes in here with a mission, and that's to win championships. And it's looking like they could really give UConn a run for their money. Of course, the Huskies are undefeated, but if there's any team that can do it, I really think it's South Carolina.
Yeah, and I mean, Gino Auriemma said yesterday in the press conference that he thinks that this South Carolina team is better than last year's South Carolina team, saying that they're hard to prepare for. They're physical, they're big inside, and I think that that's true. When we talk about Medina Okot and Joyce Edwards, I think those two having a big game is imperative to whether this team keeps up and plays well later on tonight, so that's going to be important as well. And you talked about Agat Makir, but we talked about that on Fox Carolina yesterday, saying that she's the X factor for this team, really coming off the bench, and those bench points have been a really big deal for the South Carolina team throughout the entire tournament. So it's going to take everybody. Don Staley has been saying all throughout this tournament, it's going to take a collective to win these games, and I think that's exactly what you're going to need to see from this team here tonight.
All right, we're going to wrap things up here in Phoenix. We'll, of course, talk more about this weekend next week on Monday.
Big shout out to our crew out there doing a great job covering the Gamecocks as they look for another national championship. And Carmine, we've been talking about this game all week on the show, but do you think South Carolina can get it done tonight?
Ooh, great question, Teagan. Personally, I think UConn's going to win this game, and I hate to say that, although they are the favorite by 6.5 points. Of course, they won last year's national championship by 23 points, and producer Nick is booing in my ear. He is a University of South Carolina graduate, and I'm rooting for the Gamecocks. I'm not going to say, you know, even though we are the official station of Clemson, I root for the Gamecocks as well. I just think if you're taking the feelings and the emotions out of it, with Sarah Strong, AZ Fudd, 2 first-team All-Americans who both in this game last year or in the national championship of this rematch had 24 points apiece. Sarah Strong had 15 rebounds as well. AZ Fudd was lighting it up from distance. They did have Paige Beckers, another first-team All-American last year. I'm hoping that South Carolina's half-court offense can be much better than what it was last year, and what we've seen some of this season where it gets stagnant. You don't have that dominant post player, a Camila Cardoso, an Asia Wilson, or an Aaliyah Boston to throw the ball into, dominate down low in the post with their size and strength. Joyce Edwards is incredible, a second-team All-American, yes, All-SEC for the second year in a row from Camden, right in the Columbia area, but she's not really the bruising, no doubt about it, I'm going to back you down, put the ball in the hoop. She's got great versatility, so I'm interested to see maybe Medina Okot steps up and McKeer and Latson, the new players who weren't in that matchup last season. But personally, I think UConn's half-court offense is just going to be too much to handle, and AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong and their cast of characters, Teagan, I think, unfortunately get it done over USC tonight. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think UConn has some more impact players, so to speak, just those gals that are going to get it done out there on the court, whereas the Gamecocks throughout the season, it's been a little bit of, all right, who is it going to be this game? Who's going to step up? But I will say during the postseason, the Gamecocks have really kind of turned around their offensive performance here. They've just been so powerful, but half-court-wise, yeah, I'd have to agree with you that that's one of their weaknesses. But even if UConn does take the win in this one, which I also sadly think could be a very strong possibility, I don't think it'll be the 20-point blowout that we saw last year in the national championship.
Right, I agree with that. And as we've seen the Gamecocks be effective, that defense turning into offense, getting some steals, running out, and using their athleticism, speed, and strength that they have over basically every team. The problem is UConn doesn't make very many of those mistakes. So we'll see what happens. But let's talk to another expert, our own Palmetto sports anchor, Caroline Soro, speaking with ESPN's Andraya Carter about her opinion on this Final Four matchup.
And what have you seen from this team as they gotten to this point in the year that really catches your eye?
Yeah, I think this team is all of the pieces are just fitting at the right time. I don't know if everyone appreciates how many new parts that Coach Staley had to piece together and figure out how to work and figure out how they were going to work together. And with Akot, with Tanaya, transfers that haven't necessarily been on this stage before, and then returners that have new roles and more is expected of them. And then you've got freshmen, and then you have injuries. So just watching it all, to me, peaking at the right time really fits with South Carolina because they had a lot to figure out. But their confidence on the offensive end, their connectedness on the defensive end, how they play off of each other, it just seems like they're a team that's figured it out, has a lot of confidence in it, and they know how their strengths work with their teammates' strengths around them. And so when you have an understanding of that, I know what you do well and I know how that works for me, I know what I do well and how that works for you and how we're going to work together, it just seems like they have an understanding of that. So it's just a testament to that's what the regular season is for. It's to figure all of those things out. And I think South Carolina did a great job of that.
And another team that's done a great job of that all season is UConn, not having lost a game all season long. They're also in this spot. What do you see that jumps out as maybe the biggest difference between that South Carolina-UConn matchup in the national championship last year and then what we can expect to see on Friday?
Yeah, they're completely different teams to me. I actually went back to watch the game, and I was watching it, and I was like, this gives me nothing. There's nothing really in this film that I can watch just because the teams are so different, So I think it'll be interesting. I think last year, UConn went small, and Paige Beckers was at the 4, and they don't necessarily have Paige at the 4, obviously, because she's playing in the WNBA. So to me, the idea of, and I think South Carolina's bigger than they were last year, and so the idea of which team plays big, which team plays small. Do you go small to match that they're going small, or do they go small and Dawn Staley stays with her big lineup? Does she go with their small lineup? And so kind of just there's so many games within the game, but I think of basketball like a chess, playing chess. And so which coach makes the first move in terms of switching things up, and how does the other coach counter and respond? And it'll be so much fun. I'm really excited for it.
Well, Andraya, thank you so much. We're looking forward, as I'm sure all you guys are, to watching these teams on their race to the national title. But thank you for the time.
Caroline Soro, Andraya Carter, you might see the present and the future there with Caroline leveling up. Extremely proud of her work and what she's done traveling out there to Phoenix, along with the WIS crew as well. We will probably talk a little bit more Gamecocks in the Final Four, but we're going to talk some Gamecocks baseball in their ranked win right after this.
Welcome back into Palmetto Sports Daily, Coastal Carolina baseball with yet another Sun Belt win. The Chants 10-0 in conference play after run-ruling South Alabama last night, 12-2. Luke Jones on the mound, the steady Game 1 starter for the series matchups throughout the season. It was a pretty good crowd out there last night for a Thursday. It was nice out for baseball. Weather wasn't a big effect, so it was a beautiful night out there. But the Chants racking up 3 runs in the bottom of the first, another run in the second, and then 4 runs in the bottom of the third. So big one for the Chants. They play Game 2 tonight against South Alabama, looking to advance to 11-0 in the Sun Belt. The Chants ranked 14th in the top 25 right now. They moved up 1 spot last week after sweeping their last conference opponent when they swept Marshall. So I'm kind of curious to see, Carmine, what the Chants can do this weekend and how that will affect the standings. But speaking of teams high up in those standings, number 2 Texas coming to South Carolina last night. Gamecocks getting a big win there.
How about that, Teagan? Over at Founders Park, the Gamecocks may have found something themselves against second-ranked Texas. Now this is the second top 5 win in the interim head coaching tenure of former Clemson head coach, now Gamecocks interim, Monty Lee, after winning his second ever game, taking over for Pulmonary against 4th-ranked Arkansas. And now his team has a win over second-ranked Texas, and it was a resounding win, 9-1. They clobbered the Texas Longhorns, who were pitching one of the best pitchers in all of college baseball. They used a 5-run second inning to electrify the crowd that will hopefully grow as this series goes on tonight and then tomorrow with the 3-game series against Texas, because some fans have lost some faith, but faith may start getting restored with how Monty Lee is leading this program back. It is not a finished product, obviously, just one big win along with the other top 5 win over Arkansas. But how about Patrick Evans having his career high in RBIs with 4 on the night, and Carolina earning their second top 5 win in just about a week and a half? Let's hear from the interim head coach, Monty Lee, after a top 2 win over Texas.
Well, what a ball game. We've been talking all week about playing a complete baseball game. That started against Wofford in the middle of the week. Threw the ball incredibly well and swung the bats well, played great defensively, and carried that right into today against a great Texas ball club. Hopefully we can continue to build some positive momentum and find a way to compete to win a series tomorrow.
So, Teagan, I'm interested with your opinion. How much should we take out of this win? It was nearly a run rule. I mean, a 9-1 win over second-ranked Texas. It is just one game, but what should we take about how Monty Lee's done so far based on his few-game stint as the interim?
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive, the 2 ranked wins that he's been able to get. However, I think that we need to take this all with a grain of salt. Baseball is very much so a sport where some of these unexpected wins tend to happen pretty often just because of different variables of the day. So I think this is a really good showing for Monty Lee if, he's interested in taking on that head coaching role permanently. But Gamecocks fans, I think, need to pull back a little and just see how the rest of this series goes in the next few weeks as well.
Yeah. pump the brakes maybe, but hey, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We will pump our brakes for just a second. Be right back on the other side of this short break.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. As we wrap up the week, I want to bring up something that happened at the very start of this week. Media Day for the Myrtle Beach Classic was on Monday, which meant we got to take a trip to the Dunes Golf and Beach Club to learn all about this year's tournament. Now, this is the third year this tournament is in Myrtle Beach. The first year it was just on its own. Last year it became the One Flight Myrtle Beach Classic, which brought a new element into this. Celebrities. It was the thing last year. We had Kurt Russell there, Vanna White, along with, I gotta be honest, some other celebrities that were not of my generation, so I wasn't necessarily, as familiar with them as some of the folks who went to it. But this year, Kurt Russell will be making a return, as well as John Stamos coming for the first time. And that is one I'm very excited about, Carmine. Are you a Full House fan? Did you watch that?
Yes. Danny Tanner, yes, and Jesse,
Yep, Uncle
and
Jesse.
John Stamos.
Yep, that's who
But
John Stamos
he can't wear a
played.
hat.
Yep.
He can't wear a hat. He's got to let that black slick back ride. You know what I mean?
Exactly. He's got the flow. It was his thing in the TV show. But he'll be making an appearance. He won't be golfing in the Celebrity Pro-Am, but he will be there walking around.
He's just there for presents.
He's just there. He's
Only
just
John
hanging
Stamos.
out. Well, no.
Teagan, very few celebs who could get away with not golfing and just being there for presence, appearance, ambiance. I mean, that's a rare role.
This is true. However, I will say he's performing with the Beach Boys there. I should have thrown out that they're performing a concert.
That's
at
awesome.
Myrtle Beach Classic.
Okay.
Yes, and I got to see John Stamos perform with them when he came to Carolina Country Music Fest last summer, so super fun to watch. Also fun to watch, of course, the golf part of this tournament. We'll learn the field about a week and a half before the actual tournament, but the last two winners have gone on to find some real success on the tour. Chris Gotterup, the inaugural winner, he is now 9th in the world, and then Ryan Fox, who won last year in a three-way playoff, he is now 48th in the world. We got the chance to catch up with Darren Nelson, the tournament director, about the success of the previous winners.
No, it's awesome to see. Yeah, Chris Gotterup has won 3 times since he left here, and then Ryan Fox won last summer one more time. So it's cool to see those guys go on and do well. It tells you this is a true test of golf, if they do well here and then go on to other events against the top PGA Tour players and do well and even win those events. So we like to say it's a launching pad for those guys, and we hope to continue that this year too.
And, of course, we've got the Masters coming up soon, so we'll be talking more about golf on this show. But the Myrtle Beach Classic coming up May 7th to 10th, Mother's Day weekend, as it has been for the past 2 years. We're going to be right back here on Palmetto Sports Daily.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. And Teagan, you mentioned Kurt Russell participating in the Myrtle Beach Classic as part of the Pro-Am. I think the inaugural press conference, or when everybody's together, he's got to get up there and say, you were born to be golfers, every one of you, and you were meant to be here today. One putt. If we took it 10 times, we might miss 9, but not this putt. Not today. That, of course, the iconic Miracle on Ice speech, and shout out to our Team USA bringing back the gold for the hockey folks, even if they didn't bring back all their teeth. Now, let's get to the Final Four and a more important point that we can make here. We're talking men's and women's picks. And Teagan, we mentioned earlier, I had UConn and Texas. I had all 4 Final Four teams correct, which is not crazy in the women's bracket, all 4 1 seeds. I have UConn and Texas advancing, and then I have Texas winning it all. SEC champs over South Carolina, national champs over UConn. Your thoughts on the women's bracket?
Well, I'm not going to pull a Kevin here and go with something completely different than you. I feel like that's what usually happens on the show. I'm also going to go with UConn beating South Carolina, Texas beating UCLA, and then, I just see Texas going all the way this year. I don't know if there's anybody that can beat them, even UConn. So I think the Longhorns take the Natty this year, Carmine.
Wow. And if that's the case, then Texas would be the dynasty destroyers, at least for this year, with destroying the Gamecocks in the SEC championship and another dynasty against UConn in the national championship, if that comes true. All right, on the men's side, Teagan, we got two matchups where the favorites are only favored by 1.5 points. So expecting very close matchups here. 3-seed Illinois against 2-seed UConn, and the 2-1 seeds Michigan against Arizona. Who do you have here? And then we can talk about the national champion maybe on Monday.
Yeah, I've got Arizona beating Michigan, and then this was not part of my bracket, sadly, because Duke busted my bracket. But with the UConn-Illinois matchup, I've got UConn beating Illinois. I don't see the 3-seed moving forward any more than this. I'm also a little bitter about my bracket because I was in first place for quite a while here in our work pool, until all of a sudden Duke had to mess it all up. I should have known as a Syracuse fan that Duke was going to ruin my life, Carmine.
Ooh, yeah. Good point there. I'm going to say 3-seed Illinois with all the Vitches and Itches and all the different Eastern European players they have all coming together with the size, length, shooting that they have. I think UConn, I'm rooting for them because of the Danny Hurley story, and would be great to see them win or go to a third national championship game recently, the magic run with that shot. But I think Illinois, first time Brad Underwood's been there in almost 40 years of coaching college hoops, looking for them to move on. Arizona just so well balanced. I have them beating Michigan, Koa Pete, and that group of all-stars that they have as well. So much more hoops coming our way. Gamecocks against UConn in the Final Four, and the women's basketball national champion will also be decided this week. And enjoy the hoops. We'll see you back here for March Madness on Monday.